next speaker is the Dr. Pao. So he's the director of cloud strategy and architecture in Telenor Group. He holds a PhD information from the University also on cognitive radio and has been visiting researchers in Institute of Electronical Engineering or UCLA. He was a coordinator of the EU Armed Research and Innovation Project. So he is a vice chair of open source Mano project and has a standardization experience. So.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you. Quite some time since I was working in NFV, but it was good times. So I just wanted to talk a bit about on our strategy, what we have been doing and what we are doing, and then point to some of the challenges. I think that was a bit of the task here. So I think looking back, we started with NFV fully in 2016, and also I think in the major efforts on cloud. So and also with IT, then moving more aggressively into the public cloud. And so what we did, a bit back to what we have been discussing, is that we also did kind of the disaggregation or call it delayering of the stack. So we had kind of the hardware, which was independent from the rest. Then we had the software layer for the cloud platform, basically the NFV stack. And then we had the applications. So one of the big focuses we had when establishing that was to have support for multi-vendor applications. And then we moved on. I think in 2020 we had about 90% of all the mobile traffic running in the cloud, or private cloud then, across Asia and the Nordic markets where we operate. And in some markets also 100%. And I think we got quite some benefits out of that. One thing was on the cost efficiency. That was of course one really important thing. And secondly, also in the automation, I wouldn't say we reached full into automation benefits, but I think scaling across markets, reusing the integration and way of automating took the time to market pretty much down, which was a great achievement. But more than that, I think all the learnings that we gained from that big effort has been important. Things like technology, of course, but I think also even more so into the operating model and also the commercial models. As an example, we have been working a lot on establishing how should we do the split of responsibility in a multi-vendor environment. That has not been easy for us, and I don't think it has been easy for the vendors as well. So I think for the application vendors, so I think we have been moving together, maturing over time. That becomes very important into the next step. And so another thing that we realized is that we wanted to have one common cloud for everything. But we also realized that there is a need for multi-cloud, because different applications, they have different needs and requirements. And especially as we move up into from the infrastructure as a service to the PaaS and SaaS, then that becomes even more evident. So then we moved from what we call a hybrid cloud strategy, crossing both the private and public, to what we now call the multi-cloud strategy. And so when establishing that strategy, it's a lot about the operating model, it's a lot about the governance and security model, as I will explain a bit, because we have had significant learnings into how we do security in the cloud. That's probably the most difficult topic based on experience. And so one important into this multi-cloud strategy, which is also into cloud native, is moving into everything as a service. And I think, and then I'm talking about the infrastructure, platform, software as a service as key examples. I think we have tried to do that before as well, but I'm not sure if we have been getting that completely right. So that's a major or a really important thing moving into cloud native. And that also goes along because that puts the foundation for the cloud native operating model, which is all about the people, the processes, and the tools. So I will come a bit back to that later on. And then we have the cloud adoption planning, how we do service migration. And I think what's important is that we need to have a benefit if doing it. We don't do it for fun, because refactoring, rewriting, migrating to cloud native is pretty expensive. So there needs to be a clear trigger. That's a bit on the journey and the learnings that we had there. Then we have some strategic principles, and I don't think it's very different from other operators. And I will not talk through all of this. There's a lot of things behind each bullet. So I just wanted to select a couple of them. And one of them is, as we discussed today, is about cloud native applications. Because all the new applications, we want to be cloud native, unless there's a real need for something else. But what we also have experienced as important is that when you do cloud native, you need to do it 100%. Not 50, not 70, 80, because then it becomes challenging. Like, to give an example, you all know about Multos, as the CNI. That is really important and good for SRIOV, but then it kind of comes to a savior if you have other challenges on networking. So, hey, why don't we use Multos? And then you get problems with portability, scalability, migration, and everything. So it's really important to leverage the cloud native capabilities and really do that 100%. Then the second, which I always need to mention, is on the support for multi-vendor applications. And still today, 11 years since the NFV white paper was released, you see that there are quite some examples where vendors are coming with the cloud platform and gives that together with the CNF, and basically they will not support other applications, and then it's not a cloud according to these principles. It's not a cloud. That is one thing that we experience. And then also, since we are talking standards, you see that it says de facto standard based. I think that's also something we have experienced here in HCNFV, is that looking at, for instance, OpenStack and Kubernetes, it's not that easy to specify the interfaces, right? Because they are basically open source, even though we have CNCF, which we fully support as well. They are open source, and I think that might happen more as we go. I think one area where it's important with open source, as Telefonica also pointed out, is into the orchestration, right? Where we are also into the open source mono, and has been there since the initiation. These principles are important for us when moving cloud native. Then a second thing which is of course important is the transformation. How do we get there? And then I want to focus a bit on the right picture. It's a quite simple picture, and I think you have seen that before as well. So basically everything as a service, it needs to be provided as a service from the cloud platform teams, and it needs to be consumed as a service. And that also has something to say on how do you organize yourself, how do you work, and the operating model. And this is, for us, one of the most important things when moving cloud native to get this right. And then we can imagine the service teams sitting there, and if it's a private cloud or a public cloud, in a multi-cloud environment, then consuming everything as a service becomes even more important. And then we have, what does that take? Everything from the partnerships, how we build culture, competence, set up the operating model, the way of work, I think moving more into DevSecOps and CI/CD, especially on the service team side. And of course, the technology is important. And I will not go through all the details in those blocks now. But talking about technology, on the cloud platform architecture that we follow, it's very well aligned with HCNFV. We are using many of the specifications in HC, like the Sol 5, Sol 3, Sol 1, Sol 6. So that has been a very important thing for us since the initiation in 2016 up until today. But of course there are discussions now when moving into cloud native and what's happening in the orchestration space especially. So if you look at this figure, what we also have in addition is the facility. That is something we have added lately because it becomes very important when we talk about sovereignty. The facility has a lot to say. Then we have, since 2016, we have also always included the PIM because it's a very important component, and I'm really happy to see that in Etsy that seems to be picking up more into that space as well. Because that PIM, on the physical infrastructure manager, is also integrating with other components and important for the observability and analytics. Then on the container infrastructure, I think we are pretty strict on the fact that we want that to run on bare metal. We don't want that to run in VMs. even though we know that it's running in VMs in many of the public clouds. And that is to avoid complexity, especially around the networking, with double SDN layers, challenges with root cause analysis, and all of that. But of course, it's easy starting point to put it into a VM, since we already have that infrastructure, but it's for the future, we believe that should be bare metal. And then we also have what we call the platform services, something we, of course, use a lot in public clouds, but some of them are also important in the private cloud, especially if we have multiple CNFs requiring it. And that's also an area when moving to public cloud is a place where it's easy to become locked in, right? So we need to make conscious decision on what type of pass to use. Then security I will talk about later, and observability, kind of topics that goes across. And then the last piece in the diagram to talk about is, of course, the automation orchestration. I think that has been a big challenge, and I think I saw that from Telefonica slides as well, on the moving from the specific VNFM to generic VNFM, and I can also say that it has been quite painful for us with the specific VNFMs. So I really hope that we can get around that for the future. And that's why when we put this up, we try to put it in as one block, where the application management is sitting as part of the orchestration, and I think that makes sense when we move into cloud native with Kubernetes and the declarative automation in there. But it's okay to have it as a logical block, of course, in the architecture, but this is more into how we would like to realize it in practically. Yes, then public cloud. We have a public cloud first strategy, and we are not looking away from using public cloud for the network side. In fact, we have been doing it for one of our MVNOs, where we have the core network running in the public cloud in AWS. Now, but we do have challenges, and there are challenges on these different areas that you see, but the biggest challenge is on the regulatory part. One thing is on the requirement to avoid foraging control, and we can do some things by having local pre-encryption servers, but it doesn't take away the red button. And the second thing is on the need for security cleared personnel, which is also a bit challenging in the public cloud. And the third most difficult one is on autonomy, because there are some regulations saying that you cannot, if the link to the connectivity to the border of your country goes down, you should still survive. And we might be lucky to have a region in the country where we operate, but even that is not, if the link goes down, that will not survive, according to my best knowledge. And then we have the security, which in fact is very good in public cloud, but there has been some challenges. Cost, the UPF in public cloud, that will probably stay outside for the time being. And the performance, I think, is picking up pretty well also. Then the last topic I wanted to address is on the experiences with security, and that is both for historical reasons and when moving into cloud native. And so when you start putting up a cloud, you get some basic security in place, maybe minimal to some extent. And so what we have defined is what we call the defendable architecture, and it defines 14 security capabilities. And then when you look at different clouds, you can reach a certain level of advancement when it comes to security. And we have defined from basically nothing to minimal, basic, and up to intelligent. And when we put in place a cloud working with different providers, we do an assessment and we do a design for how we can implement this. And then sometimes we also need to bring in third-party security tooling. And then we reach a certain level, and then we understand like what applications can we put in there. This is a very neat tool in order to understand how you can use clouds. And we also have the established blueprints across all the major providers, the hyperscalers and also some private cloud providers. So this is quite important experience that we have had over the years. And then basically summing up, I talked about everything as a service and the cloud native operating model as two of the most important things when moving into cloud native. Of course, we need the technology as well. Public cloud first, there are some challenges, but those and that was mainly on regulations. It's not the same in every market, but in some market it's currently very difficult to get there. And then on the security, which is also, from our perspective, what drives most delays, probably most of the costs and complexity. And it's really important to have a good model in place for how to get there. That's why we established this defendable architecture with different layers of advancement. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Paul. So any questions? Thank you. One question.
Yeah. Hi. This is again Zara from ADC. So interesting presentation. You mentioned amongst many other challenges, you mentioned this regulatory challenge. Can you give some insight into what type of challenges are there in the realm of regulation?
Yeah. So I think what I focused on is also on the regulatory challenges when moving to public cloud, mainly. So I said one of them was that the most difficult one is around autonomy. So imagine we have a mobile core network in Denmark, and then we want to put that in a public cloud region. So if that public cloud region is outside the country, or it can be inside. But irrespective of where it is, there are some regulations saying that if you close the link, the connectivity to outside your country, then your mobile network should continue to operate and work. And so even if we put it in a public cloud region in the country, according to my best knowledge, none of the hyperscalers can guarantee me that that region will survive. It might survive for 1 day, 2 days, but not say 100 days, which is a regulatory requirement. So that's the biggest challenge, right? And then the second thing is that you need certain security clearance on the people operating, everything from the hardware to the software. And if it's in a public cloud region, that's a bit difficult to guarantee. And it might be some certain NATO clearance, as an example. And then the third problem that we have faced is on that you need to guarantee that there's no foraging control. So nobody from outside your country should be able to do anything with the service. And then you can, as I said, one example is to bring in like local encryption key servers in our network, right? So then you can have some control, but still there might be mechanisms that might shut down the public cloud instances that we cannot guarantee. So those are the three main regulatory challenges when moving to public cloud.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.